gentlemen, please welcome to the stage Senior Director, Solution Strategy, Geoff Webb.
Hey. All right, good morning. Good morning. Welcome to the NetIQ Keynote here at BrainShare 2014. Thank you for coming. Thank you to our partners and to our sponsors, of course, without whom we couldn't make this event work. And thank you especially to you, our customers, without whom we wouldn't have this event at all. So I guess my first question is, where's my band? But if necessary, I'm prepared to sing. So it's, yeah, no, you do not want me to sing. You know, NetIQ, we know we have to work hard to continue to help you be successful in delivering the systems, the services, and the access to information that your users and your customers not only expect, but demand. And we know that that's difficult. And it's getting more difficult. Because every time you get those systems in place, you get the processes down, the controls are all right, what happens? Somebody comes along with a bright idea, a new piece of technology, a new disruptive trend, and it's time to start again. And yet, you have to be able to do that. You have to be able to be successful and meet those challenges, because if you can't go fast enough for the business will do it without you, or at least it'll try. It'll go around IT. It'll ignore the security organization. It'll do it itself, introduce all kinds of challenges and risks, and they end up where? Back on your desk again in the future. It's a bad thing. We know the challenges that you face are huge. So are the opportunities, if we can get this right. And we can get this right. Because as much as the infrastructure is moving out into the cloud, where you can't manage it as easily, perhaps, as much as the endpoint platform is becoming a mobile device that is owned and managed or mismanaged by the end user themselves, it is still possible to deliver those systems and services, to stay in control, to go fast enough, and to manage the risks by focusing on the one critical element that brings all those things together, that bridges platforms and services and users and information. And that critical element is identity. Understanding and managing identity gives us the ability to gain context and understanding in the world around us. It helps us manage and go fast enough. It keeps us safe and secure. Okay, so I mentioned identity. That's mine if you don't already know me. As the more observant among you have probably already noticed as well, I am, in fact, English, although I do work in our Houston, Texas office, and I live over here in the US. And I did notice yesterday that there were a few comments about English culture that were thrown out. So I would like to point out that as an Englishman who is living here in the US, I am doing my best to integrate with US culture. So there you go. It's a good hat. So let me start the morning really by asking you a very direct question. A question, in fact, so direct it's practically rude. In the words of Roger Daltrey and Pete Townsend, they're English rock stars, by the way, for those keeping count. Who are you? Who are you? It's the most direct, challenging question that we can ask. And it is challenging and direct because it is so powerful and important. It is a question that we have asked of each other since the very earliest days of language. Because it's still relevant, too. It doesn't matter if you're a Roman legionary standing on the border of Gaul in the winter of 12 AD watching a whole bunch of very hairy, shaggy tribesmen riding towards you, or you're an administrator trying to provide access to a remote user on the other side of the planet, trying to get access to a cloud data store. Understanding who you're dealing with, understanding the answer to the question, who are you, understanding identity is critical to your success, to enable you to make the right decisions. Let me, by way of an example, let me tell you a very short story. 3 or 4 months ago, I was at a German trade show in Germany, which obviously is where they have German trade shows, and I was being interviewed by a technology magazine on this subject. They were asking me, well, what do you mean by this thing to do with identity, and why is it so important to understand? And literally, while I was being interviewed, a man walked into the area where I was talking, and he picked up one of the chairs, and he walked out. Didn't say anything, just walked out with the chair. And I said to the journalist, well, that's it. That's your example. We saw what happened. But I don't know if he works for the trade show itself and just needed that chair in another room. I don't know if that chair was dangerously defective and he's a chair repairman who came to fix it. Maybe he's an eccentric chair thief who travels from country to country collecting chairs as he goes. We have no way of knowing. So while we saw what happened, we cannot have any deeper understanding of it because we lack that critical piece of context. We didn't know the identity. Now, understanding identity, understanding the answer to that question, who are you, is difficult enough in the kind of face-to-face interactions that we have every day. You know, those few hundred or several hundred interactions that we have with other people when we meet them. But of course, it's so much more challenging when you think about the interactions that we have to have online, which are measured not in hundreds, but in hundreds of thousands and millions of interactions. And of course, as more and more of our lives move online, so more and more of our identities are moving online too. And the digital identities that now exist are much more complex and rich and therefore difficult to manage. Now, NetIQ, along with our colleagues and our partners at Novell, have been helping organizations like yours manage those digital identities for the better part of 20 years now. From the very early days of the versions of NDS right the way through to the latest version of Identity Manager. Now, of course, over those 20 years, the digital identities that we're managing have become more complex and much richer. Certainly, for example, now we see that driven by things like social media, Facebook, LinkedIn, Twitter, Google+, and so on. You go back 20 years, and things were far, far simpler. 20 years ago as well, there were actually just a lot less people. 2 decades ago, there were about 5.5 billion people on the planet. Today, there's over 7 billion. 10 years from now, there'll be over 8 billion people. At the current rate, about 40% of those people are online, which means that we're seeing an explosion in the number of not only people, but digital identities that therefore we have to manage. And yet, as big as those numbers are, as rapid as that growth has been, it's tiny. It's trivial compared to the growth in a different population. the population of things, smart technologies, smartphones, wearable technology, smart cars, smart houses, smart infrastructure. Consider, for example, there are about 300 to 400,000 people born around the planet every day. Compare that to the over 4 million cell phones sold every day. The number of things is growing so fast that it is literally leaving us behind. Human beings are becoming a shrinking minority of users of the internet because more and more of these things are embedded in our lives and communicating about us, often, quite without us. This is the challenge and the promise of the Internet of Everything. A world in which there are not billions of things communicating, but hundreds and hundreds of billions of pieces of smart technology that surround us and embed us, whether they're physically in our homes, in our cars, they're inside our bodies, they're in our clothing, in our workplace. They'll be absolutely everywhere, and we must be able to manage and understand their behavior so that we can understand if they're under attack. And we must be able to understand and secure the information that they communicate about us if we wish to retain privacy and security of that information. Now, one organization that has spent a lot of time thinking about how do you build the infrastructure and the technology and the services to support the Internet of Everything is Cisco. And what I'd like to do right now is invite up our first guest of the morning, Mr. Kevin Skahill. He's Director of Product Management with Cisco. I'd like to get Kevin up, and we can talk a little bit about the way Cisco is thinking about and planning for the Internet of Everything. So, Kevin, come on up.
Hi, Geoff. Good, good. Yeah.
Take a seat. Not literally, though, because I've already done that story. So let me, first of all, ask you the kind of the inevitable "Who are you?" question. Tell us a little bit about who you are and what you do for Cisco.
Sure, I kind of expected that after seeing it backstage. Yeah, so I'm Director of Product Management in Cisco's Security Business Group, and I've got responsibility for Cisco's Identity Services Engine, or ICE for short. Mm-hmm. So ICE controls who, what, where, when, and how both users and devices connect to the network. And then once on the network, it helps enforce policy as to where those users and devices can connect, what segments of the network they can get on, what computing resources they can access. So for example, we can authenticate a point-of-sale terminal. And once we've authenticated that point-of-sale terminal, we can authorize it to connect to the PCI segment. And at the same time, we can allow a video surveillance camera onto the network, but we're going to deny it access to the PCI segment because, of course, there's no reason to have network layer reach to critical data. So what we do in ICE for the network is very analogous and very complementary to what you're doing in the identity and access management space around using identity to make policy decisions around who can access applications.
Cool. Very good. Well, thank you. It's interesting stuff. So obviously, I've talked a little bit already about the Internet of Everything and its likely impact. I mean, what's sort of Cisco's take on this? You're obviously heavily committed to thinking about and planning for the Internet of Everything. What do you see happening to the way that we as consumers, end users, but also businesses are going to have to interact with this sort of new world?
Yeah, I mean, the likely impact is huge. I mean, you've probably seen some of the commercials that we have. The cat drinks milk, it lets in the dog does this. They're a little bit, tongue-in-cheek, but they really speak to the connectedness of things. And really, the Internet of Everything is about bringing together people, processes, data, and things. And by increasing the connectedness of these, we can really transform data into information that helps us make faster and more intelligent decisions and helps us to control our environments better, manufacturing environments being just one example. And so, Cisco believes and estimates that there's a $19 trillion opportunity out there over the next decade for businesses and institutions that are going to take advantage of the Internet of Everything. And so, business leaders are realizing that now is the time to seize this opportunity. And the opportunity is really to create and expand new markets and services, to improve workforce productivity and improve operational efficiencies, and to create better customer experiences, to build stronger customer relationships, and to really to gain deeper insight into information so that we can make better decisions. And these opportunities are available to all sectors, all industries, healthcare, manufacturing, financial services, et cetera. And in fact, entire cities are taking advantage of the Internet of Everything, even as we speak. And one example of that is Hamburg. Hamburg is they're the second largest city in Germany, largest port. They're on the Elbe River, and they have about 10,000 ships that come into port each year. And Hamburg wanted to increase the efficiency not just of the port itself, but the surrounding transportation infrastructure. And so they called upon Cisco to help them in this endeavor. And so we used a lot of different sensors, whether it's for parking spaces, at the docks, with the traffic lights, sending information to drawbridges so that when a drawbridge goes up, you're going to want to reroute a container that's on a truck not to head towards that bridge, right? So there's a huge benefits here, and this really speaks to the opportunities and the business outcomes that the Internet of Everything can drive. And in this case, it helped improve traffic, it helped increase the operational efficiency of the port, and one thing we didn't talk about is it also actually increased their energy efficiency. So there's great business outcomes here that are available to companies, and so amazing things are possible with the Internet of Everything, and this is just the beginning.
Yeah, I mean, it is amazing stuff, and when you think about taking an entire city and then embedding sensors in so many different parts of it that are all interacting and exchanging information, the sort of the next obvious question really is, okay, so this stuff is all over the place, there's a lot of information flying around, what about ultimately the security implications of all of that data and all of those connected systems?
Yeah, that's a really good question, and I think the most immediate, there's lots of examples to draw from, but the most immediate example that comes to mind for me is, I'm working with a few very large healthcare organizations, and they have run a number of hospitals, and hospitals are really, grabbing the Internet of Everything by hold. They want to connect business processes with connecting things, and so there's more and more things in the hospital that are getting connected. And so in a patient's room, the infusion pump, a monitor to display electronic medical records or digital imaging, these things are getting connected. But in multiple cases, they gave me examples of where they might have, for example, a pediatric oncology department, and they have long-term patients. And so they want these patients to be comfortable, so they allow them and encourage them actually to bring their Xbox, their PlayStation, and so they do. And they literally plug these into the network, right? And of course, the concern for those of us that are security-minded is you're plugging in that device, and literally right next to it is a clinical device providing clinical care to the patient. So, it's extremely important that we do this carefully so that, first and foremost, we've got to be able to provide visibility so that we can establish the identity of what is connected to the network. Is it an Xbox? Is it an infusion pump? Is it a digital imaging system? So we need to establish identity and provide that visibility as to what's connecting. And then we need to be able to segregate those devices. First and foremost, make sure that we're segregating clinical devices from non-clinical devices. You might want to be more granular at a later point in time, but that's the second order of business after visibility. And then the third is to instantiate a threat-centric security architecture that really addresses the attack continuum before, during, and after attack, so that we can effectively discover, defend, and remediate against those attacks.
Yeah, it's powerful stuff, and as you say, that the important thing is that you have the security embedded in there too, and that and obviously the use of, again, that piece of identity to provide context and understanding really helps you. Actually, that brings me to a question I need to make sure I ask you. I don't want to run out on this one. Tell us a little bit about the work that now NetIQ is getting involved with Cisco and this ICE ecosystem. around the security technology.
Yeah, so we're really excited to have NetIQ as an ecosystem partner here. So, ICE has a lot of network context, and what we're able to do now is share that network context with NetIQ Sentinel. And so, this provides an ability for you to use that additional information in your analytics and to present a single pane of glass to your customers and our collective customers, so that they get a better view and they can actually create actionable intelligence. And so that if they need, for example, to remediate a situation, they can remediate it within that pane of glass, and it actually calls back to ICE to, for example, change the authorization of a user that's on the network. So Cisco is at the forefront of creating the platform exchange grid. We're standardizing this via the IETF, and so this is the interface that we're using here. And essentially what this does is enables NetIQ and Cisco to share information, but ultimately it's going to be for any IT system to be able to exchange information, because every system has some bit of context, and they'd like other pieces of context. So it's a great way to be able to share additional context.
That's great. Yeah, it's exciting stuff. We're thrilled to be involved as well. So, and I know you're actually going to be presenting on this a little bit later on today. Is that right?
Yep, 10:30 with Uzian.
So you're just going to run right over and do the presentation. OK, well, make sure if you have a chance, if you haven't already signed up for that one, go see that, because that's going to be a great presentation.
Thanks.
Awesome. All right, thank you. I appreciate you coming up.
Thanks, Geoff.
Thank you so much, Kevin. Thank you.
Yep.
OK, so we talked a little bit about the Internet of Everything, a world in which there are hundreds of billions of sensors that surround us, that are operating all the time. And of course, there's no off switch for the Internet of Everything. You don't log off. It's around you all of the time, which means that we have to be thinking about new ways to manage it and secure it, even if much of it exists outside of our direct control. And so the way to do that, of course, is really to start to think about identity as the way to manage all of those pieces, and to manage the interactions of the identities of all of those smart objects with our own human identities. Literally, if there is going to be an Internet of Everything, there will be, by definition, an associated identity of everything. And that's really going to force us to think in new ways about identity, to think in new ways about identity management and the interaction of all of the pieces that make up those identities. We must, for all of these things, be able to manage them, because again, the examples that we talked about just now, they're so embedded in our lives. Think of a car that is able to phone home to tell your house how long it'll be before you get there, so the house can start to warm it up in winter to make sure it's comfortable when you arrive. A hospital bed that understands not only who the patient is lying in it right now, but what treatment they need and what room that patient should be in. Medical technology that's embedded in our bodies that can administer life-saving drugs when we need them and can alert medical personnel automatically if they're required. In Germany, there is an initiative to rethink almost the entire manufacturing infrastructure of a country on the basis of smarter technology that is more efficient, more effective, and more environmentally friendly. Things like smart grids that deliver power to the right place at the right time with minimum wastage. And then, of course, as we talked about just now, smart buildings, even entire smart cities where things are managed right the way down to individual sensors in individual windows and doors in each building. The potential benefits are enormous. The potential impact, if we don't do this properly, of course, is huge. We must be able to ask of every single one of those things, every sensor, every actuator, every probe, every piece of smart technology, that most fundamental, powerful question, who are you? So that we understand its behavior, we can understand is it under attack, is it behaving the way we expect it to, what is the information that it is sharing right now. That's the power of identity. When you hear NetIQ talk about identity-powered solutions, that's what we mean. The ability of identity to provide that critical piece of context, that understanding, that intelligence, that enables us to do what we need to do safely and quickly enough. Identity is ultimately the lens through which we gain understanding into the world around us. That's why it's so important. That's why we're so committed to continuing that 20-year legacy of building identity-powered solutions to help you solve today's problems, and of course, to be positioned to address the largest challenges, even around things like the Internet of Everything.